January 29th, 1945. 2:47 p.m. Holtzheim, Belgium. Snow falls straight down, thick and quiet, the kind that swallows sound and makes every movement feel heavier than it should. The village of Holtzheim is small, just a handful of stone houses, barns, narrow lanes, but it sits astride a road the Germans can't afford to lose and the Americans can't afford to leave unsecured. The Battle of the Bulge is officially broken. On maps far to the rear, the German advance is already being erased with neat blue arrows pointing east. But here, in the frozen villages of Belgium, the war is still close enough to smell. Cordite, smoke, wet wool, blood under snow. Company C, 1st Battalion, 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 82nd Airborne Division, has been fighting since before dawn. They are under strength, tired, cold. Their breath hangs in the air like smoke. First Sergeant Leonard Funk moves through the village with a practiced calm. 5'5", about 140 pounds. A compact man bundled in winter gear, Thompson submachine gun slung over his shoulder, helmet pulled low. Acting executive officer today, the company's second-in-command was killed earlier in the fighting. The assault has gone better than expected. House by house, the Germans broke. White cloths appeared in windows. Rifles clattered onto frozen ground. By early afternoon, surrender turned into a stream. 80 German soldiers. Too many. The prisoners are gathered in the yard of a farmhouse near the edge of the village. Helmets stacked. Belts and ammunition removed. Rifles piled against a wall. They stamp their feet against the cold, hands raised, eyes darting. Company C doesn't have the manpower to deal with this properly. The fight isn't over. There are still scattered Germans in the village. Funk makes a hard decision. 4 men are left to guard the prisoners. 4 is all he can spare. Keep them here, he tells the guards. We'll send more men when we can. Then Funk turns back toward the sound of sporadic gunfire deeper in Holtzheim. He has no way of knowing what's happening behind him. Through the falling snow, a German patrol approaches the farmhouse. 10, maybe 20 men. They wear white camouflage capes over their uniforms, blending almost perfectly into the winter landscape. At a distance, in the confusion, they look American. The 4 guards realize the mistake only when the patrol is too close. Shots are fired. Orders are shouted in German. The guards are overwhelmed in seconds. Weapons are taken. Hands are forced behind heads. Knees hit the snow. The German patrol doesn't hesitate. They move straight to the prisoners. Belts are handed back. Rifles are pulled from the pile. Ammunition is passed out. Men who were prisoners moments ago are suddenly soldiers again. 80 prisoners, plus the patrol. 90 German soldiers now stand armed in the farmhouse yard. A German officer, likely a lieutenant or captain, takes charge immediately. He points, gestures, shouts orders. Machine guns are positioned. Rifles are distributed. The plan is obvious. Attack Company C from the rear. The Americans are spread out across the village, mopping up resistance, not expecting a counterattack from behind. If 90 Germans hit them now, it won't be a fight. It will be a slaughter. And then Leonard Funk walks around the corner of the farmhouse. He's come to check on the prisoners. Routine. A habit born of experience. He steps into the yard and stops. The scene doesn't make sense at first. His brain tries to reject it. The guards are on their knees. The prisoners are standing. Rifles are in German hands. For a fraction of a second, no one moves. Then the German officer sees Funk. Rank stripes, authority, leadership, a prize. The officer strides forward, boots crunching in the snow, and jams an MP-40 submachine gun hard into Funk's stomach. The cold metal presses through layers of fabric. Unmistakable. The officer shouts, German, fast, angry. Funk doesn't understand him. The officer shouts again, louder, spittle flying, face flushed red with fury. Funk looks past the officer. 90 Germans, some aiming rifles, others still picking up weapons. He glances to the side. 4 Americans on their knees, disarmed, helpless. One other GI standing near him, frozen in place. The math is brutal and immediate. There is no backup, no cover, no negotiation. Any rational man would surrender. Leonard Funk doesn't. Instead, something unexpected happens. He starts to laugh. At first it's quiet, a sharp breath that turns into a chuckle. The German officer hesitates, confused. Funk laughs again, louder this time. A full, uncontrollable laugh, shoulders shaking, breath fogging the air. The officer screams at him. Funk keeps laughing. A few German soldiers exchange looks. One or two let out nervous laughs of their own. The moment stretches, warped and unreal, tension hanging thick in the frozen air. The officer's face twists, confusion giving way to rage. He doesn't understand what's happening, and for just a few seconds, neither does anyone else. Those seconds will decide who lives and who dies. The German officer tightens his grip on the MP-40, the muzzle still buried in Leonard Funk's stomach. He shouts again, slower this time, as if volume might bridge the gap between languages. Funk doesn't reply. He's still laughing. Not mockery, not bravado. Something raw and involuntary, ripped out of him by exhaustion, cold, and the sheer absurdity of the moment. A gun in his gut, 90 enemies around him, his men kneeling in the snow. The officer expects fear, begging, obedience. Instead, he's standing in front of an American who looks like he's lost his mind. That hesitation, just a flicker, is everything. Funk's eyes move, quick and precise. He's not counting men. He's not weighing odds. That part of the brain shut down the instant the MP-40 touched him. What's running now is training. Years of drills, repetition, muscle memory burned in until action replaces thought. He notices details. The officer's stance is forward-leaning, aggressive, off-balance. The MP-40 is pressed tight, but the officer's finger isn't fully committed on the trigger. Several Germans nearby are still fumbling with slings and magazines. No one is firing, yet Funk's Thompson hangs from its sling across his chest, just under his arm. Standard airborne carry, 30-round magazine seated. Safety off. He checked it earlier without thinking because that's what experienced men do. The laughter continues. The officer gestures sharply at the Thompson, barking an unmistakable command. Even without the language, Funk understands the meaning. Drop it. Slowly, Funk raises his hands. The officer watches closely, eyes locked on the weapon. This is what he's been waiting for. The American is finally complying. Funk grips the Thompson's stock. He begins to slide the sling up over his shoulder. Slow, careful, deliberate. Every movement says surrender. The officer relaxes just a fraction. His shoulders ease. His stance widens. The MP-40 shifts slightly away from Funk's centerline. That fraction is enough. In one violent motion, Funk yanks the Thompson free, snaps the muzzle up, and squeezes the trigger. The first burst hits the officer square in the chest. The Thompson roars. Deep, brutal, unmistakable. .45 ACP rounds hammer into the German officer at point-blank range. There's no time to react. No time to scream. The officer collapses backward into the snow, dead before his body stops moving. For half a heartbeat, the yard is frozen in disbelief. Then Funk keeps firing. He pivots left, the Thompson bucking against his shoulder, muzzle flashing. Bullets tear into the nearest Germans. Men who were still adjusting slings, still processing what they'd just seen. They drop hard. Some scream, some don't. Hot brass sprays into the snow, hissing as it lands. Powder smoke mixes with cold air, forming a low-gray haze around Funk. He empties the magazine in seconds. The Thompson clicks dry. This is the most dangerous moment. Reloading takes time, seconds measured in lifetimes. If the Germans recover now, Funk dies. Instead of freezing, Funk moves. His hands are already pulling a fresh magazine from his pouch. Slam. Seat. Rack. The Thompson is alive again. As he fires, Funk shouts, not in panic but command. Get their weapons. Get their weapons. The four Americans on their knees hesitate for a split second. Shock, disbelief, Then instinct kicks in. They dive for rifles dropped by the dead and wounded Germans. Fingers fumble, then find triggers. Shots ring out. The yard erupts into chaos. The Germans weren't prepared for this. Their officer is dead. No orders. No plan for resistance. They were seconds away from becoming the hunters. Now they're targets. Some Germans fire wildly. Bullets crack past Funk's head, punching into walls and fence posts. One round hits the American standing beside Funk. He goes down hard, motionless in the snow. Funk doesn't stop. He steps forward, firing short, controlled bursts, shifting targets automatically. Left, right, center mass. Movement triggers response. The world narrows to noise and motion. Men falling, weapons dropping, shouts turning into screams. The Americans, seconds ago prisoners, are now standing, shooting, moving, fighting. The Germans break. Some throw their weapons down almost immediately, hands snapping upward. Others stumble backward, wounded, bleeding into the snow. A few try to run and are cut down before they take 3 steps. The entire fight lasts less than a minute. When the shooting finally stops, the silence feels unreal. 21 German soldiers lie dead in the yard. 24 more are wounded. The rest, over 40 men, stand shaking, hands raised, eyes wide with shock. The prisoners are prisoners again. Leonard Funk stands in the center of the farmhouse yard, breath heaving, Thompson smoking in his hands. Snowflakes settle on his helmet, on his shoulders, on the bodies at his feet. He looks around once more, assessing like he always does. Then he lowers the weapon. That, he says flatly, was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. The silence doesn't last long. Somewhere in the village, a rifle cracks. Then another. The war is still happening. Just not here. Not in this yard littered with weapons and bodies. Leonard Funk exhales slowly, the adrenaline draining out of him in a wave that makes his legs feel suddenly weak. His hands shake as he lowers the Thompson and lets it hang from its sling again. The snow is no longer white. Dark patches spread where men fell, seeping through wool uniforms and pooling beneath motionless limbs. Steam rises faintly from the bodies, heat escaping into the frozen air. Funk turns to the 4 Americans who were on their knees moments ago. They're alive. One is bleeding from a shallow graze along his arm. Another stares at the rifle in his hands like he doesn't remember picking it up. The third is breathing so hard it sounds painful. The fourth, Private First Class Harold Red Evans, just keeps repeating the same words under his breath. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. The 5th American, the one standing near Funk when it began, lies face down in the snow, unmoving. Funk kneels beside him, flips him over carefully. There's no pulse. 1 round, clean, through the chest. Funk closes the man's eyes with 2 fingers. No words. There isn't time, and there wouldn't be enough even if there were. He stands and turns back to the Germans. Hands up, weapons dropped. Shock written across every face. Some are crying. Some are staring at Funk like he's something unreal. They had him, outnumbered him, controlled the moment, and lost everything in under a minute. Funk points to the far wall of the farmhouse. Move, over there, now. They hesitate. Funk raises the Thompson, not threatening, just present. They move. One by one, the Germans shuffle into position, hands still raised. A few wounded men collapse as they walk, blood marking their path in the snow. Funk assigns 2 Americans to watch them, rotating the others to cover angles and check weapons. Training, order, control. The chaos is over. A runner finally arrives from deeper in the village. Breathless, eyes wide when he takes in the scene. What the hell happened here? Funk doesn't look up as he checks his magazine. They tried something stupid. Word spreads fast. Within minutes, Company C's officers arrive. Then battalion staff. Then men from neighboring units who heard the shooting and came running. They stop short when they see the yard. Bodies. Wounded Germans. A pile of weapons larger than before. Someone starts counting. Jesus! There's got to be 20 dead. Another shakes his head. They almost wiped us out. From the rear. The realization hits everyone at once. If Funk hadn't come back when he did, if he'd arrived 30 seconds later, if he'd hesitated, Company C would have been caught in a crossfire they couldn't survive. The fight in Holtzheim would have ended very differently. An officer pulls Funk aside. What happened, exactly? Funk shrugs, rubbing at the back of his neck. They had my men. Thought I dropped the gun. I didn't. That's it. That's it. There's no bragging in his voice. No drama. Just fact. Later that night, as Holtzheim finally goes quiet, Funk sits alone inside the farmhouse. Helmet off, steam rising from his wet hair. His hands still smell like gun oil and burned powder. The laughter comes back to him then. He doesn't remember deciding to laugh. It just happened. A crack in the moment that let him slip through. He wonders, briefly, what would have happened if the German officer hadn't hesitated. Then he pushes the thought away. There's another village tomorrow. Another fight. The paperwork will come later. So will the questions. The official report is written days later, when the ink won't freeze and the men involved have slept more than a few hours at a time. It reads dry, precise, almost clinical. Enemy counteraction at Holtzheim neutralized. Approximately 21 enemy Kia. Multiple wounded. Prisoners secured. One friendly Kia. Nowhere in the typed lines does it say how close Company C came to being erased. Nowhere does it describe the moment an entire engagement hinged on a single second of hesitation and a single man's refusal to surrender. But stories travel faster than reports. By the time the 82nd Airborne pulls out of Holtzheim, everyone knows. They tell it differently depending on who's speaking. Some say Funk smiled with a gun in his gut. Others swear he laughed in the officer's face. A few claim he said something clever first, something defiant, something cinematic. Funk never corrects them. He doesn't add details, doesn't polish the edges. When pressed, he just says the same thing. I didn't have a choice. The higher-ups disagree. At regimental headquarters, officers replay the scenario again and again. Maps spread across tables. Unit positions marked in pencil. The conclusion is always the same. If the Germans had launched their counterattack, if they'd hit Company C from behind, the casualties would have been catastrophic. The battalion commander writes a recommendation. The division commander signs it. The language is formal, but the meaning is unmistakable. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Weeks later, the paperwork reaches the War Department. Leonard Alfred Funk is recommended for the Medal of Honor. The war doesn't pause to acknowledge it. February turns into March, then April. Germany collapses in pieces. Funk keeps fighting. He doesn't talk about Holtzheim in foxholes or around fires. He doesn't retell the story to new replacements. If someone brings it up, he shrugs it off and changes the subject. There's a reason for that. When the noise fades and the days stretch quiet, Funk remembers the man who didn't get up from the snow, the one American body in that yard. Heroism doesn't erase weight. It adds to it. On May 12, 1945, with the war in Europe over, Leonard Funk stands at attention in front of General James Gavin, commander of the 82nd Airborne Division. The citation is read aloud. Every detail is there. Captured. Surrounded. Refused to surrender. Killed 21 enemy soldiers in 45 seconds. When the medal is placed around his neck, it feels heavier than he expects. Afterward, reporters ask him how he did it. How did you stay calm? Did you think you'd survive? Why didn't you surrender? Funk answers each question the same way. I was just doing my job. It sounds simple. It isn't. The truth, the one he doesn't say, is this. Courage didn't arrive like a feeling. There was no rush of confidence. No certainty of survival. There was only a moment when action mattered more than fear. And he stepped into it. The photographs come first. Black and white. Crisp uniforms. The Medal of Honor catching the light as it rests against Leonard Funk's chest. In every image, he stands straight, expression neutral, eyes forward. He looks exactly like what the country wants a hero to look like. The speeches follow. Ceremonies. Handshakes. A few carefully chosen words about bravery and sacrifice. Funk listens politely, nods when expected, says thank you when prompted. Then it ends. The war has a way of doing that, roaring into silence almost overnight. By late 1945, Funk is back in civilian clothes. No helmet, no Thompson, no men looking to him for orders. Just another American veteran stepping off a train into a country already trying to move on. He returns to Indiana. The transition is harder than he admits. In Europe, everything was immediate, simple in its own brutal way. Problems announced themselves with gunfire. Decisions had weight but also clarity. At home, the days stretch long and undefined. People ask him about the medal. Strangers, neighbors, friends of friends who've heard the story secondhand. What was it like? Were you scared? Did you really take them all down by yourself? Funk answers politely but briefly. Yes. No, not by myself. He never mentions the laughter unless someone else brings it up, and even then, he waves it away like a rumor that got out of hand. The truth is, he doesn't like remembering that moment. Not because of the danger, because of how thin the line was. He marries, builds a life, works steadily. The medal is kept safe, but not displayed. It comes out for official events and then goes back into its case. Years pass. The story of Holtzheim doesn't fade, it sharpens. Military historians pick it up. Training officers use it as a case study. Articles describe it as one of the most decisive single-handed actions of the war. 45 seconds. That number sticks. 45 seconds that saved a company. 45 seconds that changed a battle. 45 seconds that turned surrender into survival. Funk is invited to speak occasionally. To cadets. To young officers. To paratroopers wearing the same patch he once wore. When he talks, he doesn't dramatize it. He talks about hesitation, about awareness, about how quickly control disappears when leaders fall. And sometimes, only sometimes, he talks about the laugh. Your body reacts before your mind catches up, he tells them. You don't always choose how fear shows up. The room usually goes quiet when he says that, because they understand what he's really saying. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's movement despite it. Leonard Funk lives a long life. He doesn't chase attention, doesn't correct the myths, doesn't try to shape how history remembers him. When he dies in 1992, he is buried with full military honors. At the graveside, someone reads the citation one last time. The words are unchanged. They still don't capture the cold, or the snow, or the gun pressed into his stomach. But they don't need to, because the men who were there, the ones who lived, already know.